Hi, Vicky. How are you?
I'm very good. It's really good to be here, Nazam.
And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you.
I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I love having these conversations.
Thank you. So, friends, we have Vicky here. She is a successful person with multiple passions. So, this is the main topic of today's interview about having multiple passions. She has had 20 plus jobs over 5 careers, lived in 9 urban centers across 3 countries, explored 55 countries. You are quite a traveler,
Oh,
Vicky.
yeah. Yeah.
And she has had thousands of different interests. So, uh, this Vicky, I always like just focus on one thing, just do not deviate, do not have multiple passions. If you dig in 100 different places, you will not be anywhere and all that. And
Yeah.
on contradictory, I am here talking to a person with multiple passions and successful. Let me underline
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so could you please tell about multiple passions are awesome. You say that. What
Yeah.
specifically do you mean by that?
So firstly, like for me, part of the challenge we have is that piece you were just saying about choose the one thing, that's how you'll be successful, et cetera, et cetera. That works for some people. People who are wired in that way. There are people who are wired, and then they have this thing that absolutely lights them up, and it lights them up forever and ever and ever and ever, right? And they get really deep into it, everything to do with it, all that kind of stuff, and they become very, very successful with just that one thing. Or even for some people, it's a small handful of things, right? But that's who they are, and that's how they're successful, and good on them. I'm really excited for them. Fantastic. However, the messaging we get is that that's what all of us should be like. And that's the only way to be successful. But increasingly over the certainly in my life, in the last 15 to 20 years, I've watched businesses shift away from that. I've watched individuals shift away from that. And I've always had I am wired to have multiple passions. It's not something you just become, right? You are. That's what makes me happy. That's where I thrive, in places of variety and change. But what I've been watching happening is more and more the world is beginning to open up and say, actually, those who have this broad range of perspectives, those who have all these skills and knowledge and expertise in this, but across a broad range rather than really, really deep into one thing, they're who we're looking for. They're these awesome people who integrate and bring together all this stuff. What I'm also watching, though, is that dangerous move of the messaging changing from you've got to have one thing to you've got to have everything. It's like, well, no, actually, again, there are people who are wired like this. This is our natural place of thriving. When you try and force us into one thing, and that has happened at various points in my life where people have tried to make me choose, we become miserable. And you get the least out of us because we're not happy, right? Whereas the more I get to play and do lots of different stuff and change and pivot and adapt, and I'm really happy. I love that. I thrive in that. I have so many people in my life who are very dear to me, who if I put them in that situation, and I've tried, hate it and are really miserable, and you don't get the best out of them, right? And so for me, it is about people playing to who they actually are, and that we don't need all of us to be the same, right? That it's about that diversity. It's about that working together and playing to our strengths in different ways and complementing one another. That's where the magic comes in, right? So the reason I see people with multiple passions as awesome is because we are, obviously, but it's also we bring something at the moment that the world needs, right? Because one of the things that is breaking my heart and has been for a long time now is the duality that that the polarity, the duality, the either or. You're either this or you're that. You're either purple or you're green. It's just, that's not how the world works, right? And not just the world, but actually the universe. Nothing works like that. It's all about everything playing together and intertwining and all that kind of stuff. And people with multiple passions naturally work in that way anyway. That's how we see the world. It's how we approach the world, and it's how we approach our lives. The secret, which you beautifully put in there, was the "and successful" piece. Because what I often see with people with multiple passions is what they're trying desperately to do is to choose the one thing, because they're still buying into that, which is making them miserable, which means they're not successful, right? And so there's that element of it, but there's also an element of, so the reason I'm successful is because not only do I know what my strengths are, and I've done a lot of work around knowing who I am and how I'm wired and what matters to me and what difference I want to make in the world, and all that kind of stuff. I'm constantly learning, not just about what's out there, but what's in here as well, right? And growing and evolving. So for myself, as well as the things I'm doing. But right from really early on, and this is partly, so I was raised in New Zealand, that would be country one. And Kiwis are independent, right? We're raised to be very independent people and to try things out and to have a go. And so really early on, I went, this is my life. It's my career. It's my professional journey. I make the choices. So if I want to change from doing this thing to that thing, that's me making that choice. I need to take responsibility for getting myself into that new thing, right? And if that means investing and studying or going and doing some work experience somewhere so that I can switch, I get that thing that they're looking for, then I do that, right? That's up to me. What I see with a lot of people who are multiple passions, who they're either not aware of it, or they're not owning it, or they're not, they know they've got multiple passions, but they're trying to find the one of them that they can make successful. They often also are waiting for them to fix it, whatever that is, right? And that is not a way to be successful, because no one, whether they're a specialist or a multiple passion person, is successful if they wait for others to fix it. Just isn't how things work, right? Just no.
Okay. So, Vikki, did anyone tell you, or did you feel that, no, I'm not normal like the other crowd go with, I'm different? And was there a conflict in accepting that, or it was natural shift for you to have multiple passions and exploring them and all that stuff?
I've definitely had times where I've struggled with it, right?
Okay.
So I did a bachelor's in law and in New Zealand, and New Zealand really, I mean, this is decades ago now, even then they encouraged people to do multiple bachelor's degrees at the same time.
Okay.
So you might do a double major, right? That was a normal thing to do even back in my day. And now a lot of their degrees have got a whole lot of variety of things going into them. But for whatever reason, when I went into my law degree, I just decided to do my law degree. And even in my first year, right, in the second semester, for some reason, I only had something like 4 hours of class in a week. And I was like, even then I knew myself well enough to know that if the busier I was, the more I'd actually engage. If I didn't have enough going on, I'd just sit back and do nothing. And so I thought, you know what, I am really fascinated in the whole psychology side of things. I'd love to do some more of that. I'd like to at least pick up one more paper and just see, and then I could explore it. So I went and spoke to whoever it was, some senior person at the university, and said, this is what I want to do. And he said, no, just focus on, right? Just focus on the thing. And I'm like, I'm telling you that doesn't work for me, right? And he was just like, no, it wasn't open at all to exploring this. So I just went, okay, fine, whatever, and just went into cruise mode and finished that year. But so that was a really small thing of it, and I just kind of accepted it and went with the flow. And I was about 19 or so at the time. Fast forward, but then when I started looking at what was I going to do as a job, what was I going to, get out there and do, I ended up over probably those first 6 to 8 years of working in New Zealand, doing a variety of different things. And in New Zealand, you were encouraged, and I'm not sure if it's still like this because I haven't lived there for a long time, but at that time, you were encouraged to only stay within a certain type of employment for about 2 years. For those first kind of 10 years of your career, the whole intention being that you would get a broad experience across that sort of first 10 years of your career, and then you would decide where to specialize. So I moved over here to the UK, having that background of having had, 3, 4 different jobs, different kind of employments, different perspectives. And I'd also done, after my law degree, I went into a social work master's because I was like, well, actually, I really want to look at the people side of things, And so I'd done those things. And then I came over here to the UK, and it's different here. This part of the world is different. And they don't encourage broad experiences, or they didn't, certainly when I arrived. Things are changing now, but they didn't when I first arrived. And so I got here and I started looking for work, and I decided at this point that I wanted to switch into another career. So my third one, right? I wanted to go into learning and development. And so I was looking for work in that space, but I was also kind of sitting there going, okay, well, how do I get into that? So I then began to research what that meant over here, was, and I discovered there was professional ways of doing it. There was courses I could do, there was et cetera, et cetera. So I signed up for one of those. But when I sent my CV out to recruitment agents, which is how it works over here, I was like, I got these calls back from them saying, oh, well, your CV is interesting. And I was sitting there going, well, it makes sense to me, right? Like, I know why it looks like that, which is when I had to go, what are they not seeing? Right? What do I know that they're not seeing? And so the thing I have with people with multiple passions is when they come to me and they're like, there's something wrong with me because I can't choose the one thing, right? I'm like, no, that's not true. And let me get it really clear. You're never going to choose the one thing. And the sooner you become happy with that and own that and play to it, the better your life is going to be. But also the more successful your life is going to be, because you need to learn some stuff about yourself. So no, I don't have the one thing, but what I do have, and this is what I learned through this whole CV thing, the sort of we're not quite getting it, right, was, but it makes sense to me. And I was like, okay, so why does it make sense to me? What is under that? And what I say and work with my clients around is, you don't have the one thing, but what you will have and do have are underlying patterns, right? So those are the kind of the weaving that happens beneath you, that is where your drive and your interest focus, because that's the other thing people with multiple passions will say to me. I'll say, well, what are you into? What are your passions? And they'll be like, oh, I'm into everything. And I'm like, no, you're not, right? You are not into everything. So I, for instance, have zero interest in sport, just none. I grew up in New Zealand, which, as we know, the religion for New Zealand is sport. I don't care. So my partner, who is a hummingbird as well, that's what I call us, he is really into sport. That's one of his things. He's really into it. And I'm interested when it's about the people side of things, because my underlying passions, the reason I'd gone into law, the reason I'd done social work, the reason I wanted to do learning and development, it's all about people and change. And those are my two patterns, right? But they're really broad patterns. It's not people in this specific area or change in this particular way. It's those two things and how they work together. How do people grow and evolve and through their own evolution, change the world around them, transform, transmute, all that kind of stuff. That's what fascinates me. And all of the work, when you look at all of my work, everything I've done, the 5 different careers, and I am just looking at my 6th career at the moment, but at the moment I'm still in my 5th, so but all of them are about people and change and what makes them tick and what difference they want to make in the world and how they're doing that, right? And so when people would say to me, you need to choose the one thing, I was like, well, no, I don't actually. But also the reason I'm as successful as I am now is because everything I have done has come out of those patterns. And when I became conscious of that, when I moved over here, I am much more conscious in the choices I make and if it's from a professional perspective, and the learning I choose to do and how that all builds and ties on each other. So it's still different, but I can clearly see the story. I can, when people, if I'm looking for a particular piece of work now, well, actually, I very really need to, I'll get calls, right? Are you available to do this? Are you interested? Do you? And I'll say, let's explore that some more. And even if it's an area that I haven't necessarily worked in before, there'll be a way I can say, here's what I will bring. These are the transferable experiences and skills and knowledge I have that will mean that I can do this piece of work and really enjoy it. And I'm going to enjoy it as well because I'm going to learn a lot, which is another thing that's massive for us. We love learning, love it, which is one of the reasons we're constantly changing, because we want to learn something new, we want to add to it. But the more we do that playing to our patterns, the more we get to that point where we might not be a deep expert in the skinny stuff and the narrow things, but I'm a broad expert across people and change. And so that's what I get called for, that's what I get valued for, that's what I get paid for, right, is that piece. So absolutely, I've had to face the what is wrong with you. And one of the other ones is, which happens often, and I get it, I've had it myself, and all the people I know who are hummingbirds have had it at some point. Someone in their family or close friend, particularly friends from their youth, will say to them, you're just changing again. Why are you changing? Why don't you just settle down and be normal? Right? Like everyone else. And you're just like, I've got zero interest in doing that. Just no. And again, that's become, when I was much younger, that was really hurtful. I found it really painful. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. And there have been times in my career when I have tried to fit into what I'm being told I need to do. And all that happens with that is I become more and more miserable. And I get to that point where I'm like, I've got to break out. Yeah, enough already. I'm going to do it my way. And that can be painful too, when you do finally get to that point when I finally said, you know what, I am going to do things my way. It is hard. There are times it's really hard. And yet through that experience, I now have these absolutely amazing people in my life all over the world. I have a really interesting life full of variety and growth and, letting go of things, finding new things, just constantly. And I love my life because of that, because I've learned to do that. I've learned how to go with the flow when my passions change, rather than kind of going, but I'm really into that. Why am I not really into that anymore? I've spent the last 2 years really into that. Why am I, now I'm like, okay, so that one's leaving. See you later. Oh, look, there's a new one. Oh, shiny things. So yes.
Yeah.
But with family, it can be hard, right? When your family puts the pressure on, and why aren't you settling down? Why aren't you making that choice? Why aren't you? So, well, I'm never going to, this is actually how I rock and roll. You do you, I'll do me.
Yes. And you know what, Vikki, before this interview has begun, I was going through your profile, and I realized that this is my 5th career. So then I was like, okay, wait, I'm going to talk to someone. It was awesome. Yeah. So I understand where you are coming from. So,
yeah.
And, Yes, since you have already touched it, but still I want to emphasize on this question once again for more deeper discussion, Vicky. What are the biggest challenges faced by people with multiple passions? Like, as you call them as hummingbirds.
Mm.
So, could you please just explore a bit more on the kind of challenges these people have?
So so what are the biggest challenges specifically around being people with multiple passions? I mean, humans
Yes,
have
yes,
challenges,
specific.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
And
in
some of,
general, this category.
yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest pain points that people with multiple passions come to me with is time. And it's interesting when I talk to people who aren't people with multiple passions, and they're like, well, no one has time. And I'm like, yeah, but this isn't about time management as such, right? This is actually about what they're sitting there saying is, I don't have time to have a career that does this, meet my family's requirements, do whatever other commitments I might have, and constantly be in this space of learning and evolving and doing my multiple passions. And I've got friends who are, hummingbirds who are really into various types of crafts or art or music or whatever, and they love all of that kind of stuff and exploring it all, but they just keep saying, I can't do it all. And that's why they'll come to me and say, well, I feel like I either have to choose to follow all my multiple passions and not make any money and not be successful, or I choose to have a career and look after my family and not follow my multiple passions. So I'll be successful, but I'll be miserable, right? And it's the difference for me, but for them, but as opposed to people, say, who have got one or two things, and they may be really driven by their careers, and so spend a lot of time focusing on their work. That's a different challenge, because really what I work with them around, and within my actual professional work, I've done work with people like this around this stuff. It's more about them understanding, them setting boundaries, right? That yes, you are into this one thing, but you don't have to work 16 hours a day on that. You could work 10 hours a day on that and use those other 6 hours to do family and other stuff, right? But they don't have this burning desire for constantly learning something new, constantly doing new stuff, whereas people with multiple passions do. And so what I work with them around is, because it's different for all of us, how we balance it. And also the other thing I work with them around is what your lifestyle is like now will change, right? Particularly if you've got a family. So if you've got small kids, then you do have a priority there. You've chosen to breed. You therefore need to prioritize nurturing and raising what you've bred, right? Whereas someone like me, Gareth and I never wanted kids. So some of my lifestyle is because I made that lifestyle choice. No kids. Therefore, I get to do all these other things.
Same.
Right? Exactly. Whereas if you choose to have children, then yes, they're a priority. And that does not mean you put all your multiple passions to one side, right? And one of the things I was talking to a friend about who does have kids and is a person with multiple passions, what she's actually been doing is increasingly including her children in the things that she is passionate about. So she's not having to go, well, I've got the kids and I'm doing that with them and I can't do anything I enjoy while I'm doing the kids. And then I get that 30 minutes each day, right? That is mine. She's like, well, that yes, there's the day-to-day management of a family, but actually part of that could be, I'm really into, she happens to be into, she loves anything to do with water, like water sports and stuff like that. So as the kids are getting a bit older, she's introducing them to playing with canoes and kayaks and learning how to do bodyboarding. And, they've all learned to swim. They learned to swim when they were born, basically. But, she's looking at, well, how do I involve them to a degree in what I'm doing, right? So I get to do what I love and so I've got them with me. And then as things are changing, like she's moving from one to another, and she's got other things she's really into as well, multiple passions. She's, depending on whether the kids have got show any interest, she's introducing them and bringing them into it too, right? So there are ways to weave this together. It doesn't have to be, and it's different for everybody, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges is time. Another one is the reward piece. And again, I work with them around that. What do they mean by reward? And I keep hearing, and I'm just like, where did this come from, right? Where in the world did this come from? That what success looks like, what reward looks like. You're only really being rewarded if, and therefore is successful if, you have a 6-figure income, which, it comes out of the States. So 6 figures in the US, right? So whatever, 100,000 plus US dollars, right? And I'm like, okay, tell me about what brings you joy in life. Tell me about the lifestyle you actually desire. Forget what you think you should have. What brings you joy? What lifestyle do you genuinely desire, right? Because that, you may find, like if you're someone who's really minimalist, likes to have quite a quiet life, and your interests are much more around, your passions are much more around, say, the earth and creating from a place of natural, organic, whatever, right? You don't need $100,000 a year, right? Whereas if what your passions are and the lifestyle you want is very much at the luxury end and opulence and traveling all the time, but traveling in, because I travel all the time, but I don't do this, travel in really expensive hotels, et cetera, flying in private jets, you're going to need more than $100,000 a year, right? The thing I work with them around as well, though, people with multiple passions, is once you've kind of looked at that and gone, actually, what do I want? Not what does everybody else tell me I should want, but what do I want? That then gives you the choice to go, how do I do that? How do I arrange my life and weave things together in such a way that that is the lifestyle I am living now? Not some, I'm going to have that life. And I've done this myself at times when I've realized I keep waiting for the one day. So I grew up always wanting to go and travel through Africa. I'd always wanted to do that. I had dreams of things like going to Victoria Falls because, it was named after me. Not really, but I still wanted to go because obviously, and all this kind of stuff. And it was as I turned 40 that I suddenly went, well, when is this one day? Right? When, if it's always one day, then I may as well say never. And so I went, right, I am going to do this in 3 years. And I did, right? And I made that happen because I went, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this in this way. And how am I going to do it? And what, and so suddenly I became a lot more. And so we all do that. We all do the one day. So when I'm working with my clients, I'm like, what do you want now? Right? And how do you get that now? Not in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but now. And then, and this is the thing I say to them, because they're like, oh, specialists have it easy. The world's designed for specialists. They just move up the ladder and they get paid. And I'm like, no, it's not how it works. I'm like, if you genuinely want this lifestyle, which means stretching yourself, I don't care if you're a specialist or a person with multiple passions. You are going to have to make choices. You are going to have to say no to certain things. You are going to have to put in a certain level of dedication and, commitment. You're going to have to push through times that are boring or downright horrible to get to where you want to go. It doesn't just happen magically. Well, I mean, now we're getting into actually it does happen magically, but you've got to be in alignment.
Yes.
Right. So as far as and what I find sometimes when I'm working with anybody who I'm coaching, it depends where they're at when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? As the language I use. But it does happen magically. But magic requires alignment. Alignment requires getting to know who you are, being in touch with yourself, in alignment with the universe, etc., etc., etc. Right? I don't care if you have multiple passions or you're a specialist or you're anywhere in between. Yeah, magic only comes with alignment.
And Vikki, generally, like people with multiple passions tend to be or assumed to be very serious and all that, but whereas I see this element of having humor through your Facebook posts and what I know, so you have fun, you have humor, you have joyful way of living and not taking too seriously, at the same time seriously pursuing your multiple passions. How are you able to balance
Right. So that the joy. So when Beth and I, so you've met Beth, when Beth, my friend Beth and I, she's also a hummingbird. When we were at law school together, so when we were in our early 20s, I look back at me then, and I was a very serious person. I was a very sarcastic person. I was incredibly cynical. I remember one particular occasion, my sister had come to visit me at university, and we'd gone into town and we were walking along. And she said to me, "Oh, for goodness sake, would you just smile?" Right? And I looked at her, I was like, I am not walking down the street with a big goofy grin on my face. It's just not happening, you know. And then life happens. And this happens to all humans, and we get to choose how we respond to it. And I had a number of things happen. So my father died, my brother died. My sister's middle daughter has Down syndrome. And then all of that had happened by the time I was in my early 30s. And then my marriage ended. And that, on a personal level, absolutely shattered me.
Oh.
And I made that choice during that darkest period of my life. I got to choose how I experienced life.
Oh, wow.
And I said, even in the worst, when I was struggling to make it minute by minute, I went, every day I am going to see something beautiful in this world. Wow. And sometimes it might just be a leaf, right? Where I would stop and notice the beauty of a leaf, looking at the veins that ran through it, admiring and losing myself in that one tiny piece of creation and how beautiful and exquisite and individual it was. Other times it would be appreciating, you know, really, truly, deeply appreciating a connection with a friend, someone who was there for me at the time and just let me be, and, you know, stuff like that. And I had a lot of people in my life who did that for me at the time. But I made that life choice then. I began to be grateful. I began to appreciate and look for and focus and filter for the beauty in the world. And that was all part of my healing. So that was kind of the beginning of moving into, like you're saying, this person of joy, this person who loves life. I mean, I've always had a sense of humor. It's been I have a very dry sense of humor and a gentle sense of humor, right? Recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been re-owning my quiet rebel. I've always been a quiet rebel, but for a long time, I've kind of ignored it, you know, that because it wasn't acceptable. Not that it, you know, and if you were going to rebel, you had to be this in your face rebellion, you know, or you just got on and fitted in with everybody. And I've actually realized that I have actually been quietly rebelling my whole life. And that's, I'm very much an introvert. I'm a social introvert, because I enjoy people, but I enjoy people on my terms. And what that means is I need lots of lovely time to myself, nice and quiet. And then I'll be energetic and full and ready to be there for people. But then I need to come back into myself, right? And it's that, again, it's about playing to yourself. And so I agree with you. I know some people with multiple passions who are so serious about each of their multiple passions, and how do they, and they get very, and I'm like, it's your choice, right? It's your choice how you engage with the life that you have. It's your choice about how you experience each day. And I did have someone say to me, and this was when my dad died. So we were just finishing uni, when my father died. And she said to me during that final year, I mean, you can imagine, right? I had all the pressure to finish my degree. My father died. It was just, and I was doing something for a community group. And this woman who was at law school with me said to me, I don't understand how you're doing what you're doing. And even then, when I was cynical and etc., the death of my father taught me is life is short. No matter how long life is still short. And we are here, whatever your belief systems are, we get to experience this life in this time once, in this environment, and whatever that might be. And we get to choose how we experience it. And so even then I was doing that. So by the time I was shattered and broken and had to rebuild myself, I still had that core of, you only get to live life once, which is why I'm so big on playing to understanding who you are, your shadows and your light, and playing to your strengths. And actually, you're only truly strong when you allow yourself to weave your shadow and light together. When you try and keep those separate or try and ignore your shadow, or I've got friends who live in their shadow and pretend there's no light. If you do, you're not genuinely strong, right? Because you're not drawing on all of who you are. So
thank you, Vikki, for opening up about your past as well. I never knew that you had that side of life as well, where you have been through, and what a transformation. That's inspiring.
Yeah, it is interesting actually, because when you talk about people transforming, people who meet me now, almost everyone that knows me in this country has only ever known positive, proactive, optimistic Vikki. And when I try and explain to them or introduce them to who Vikki once was, it just doesn't compute, because they've never really seen me like that. Yeah. They're like, but I've known you for this long and you've never been like that. And I'm like, yeah, but I am 50 years old, right? We've had life experiences, and it's up to us how we process those or learn from them, or in some cases people choose not to process them or ignore them, or they don't see them as the gifts that they can be, right? Even the hardest times are gifts if we allow them to be, because that's where we can learn. We can learn at a really deep level when we allow ourselves to do that. And I don't care if you're a person with multiple passions or not, that's human experience.
And also, I like this statement where you said, after sharing your past, you said, I made a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's one of my areas of professional expertise is neuro-linguistic programming and embraining, right? So those now very much twined together. And I really clearly remember, for me, that was one of the biggest ahas when I first started NLP was, you cannot make any genuine transformational change within yourself or out there if we don't start from the place of, I am 100% responsible for who I am and where I am at in the world. And what that means is every single moment in your life when you're making a choice or a decision, it's your choice or decision. It's not someone else who's forcing you to be in this place. Even when you're in environments that are really unpleasant or genuinely terrifyingly horrible, and I know that there are humans living that life, you still have a choice how you experience it. And what was her name? I'm really bad with names. Corrie ten Boom. So there was a woman. There have been books that have come out about the Holocaust, of course, right? And these people have written about how they were in this horrific environment for, what was it, 5, 6 years, 7 years. And they came out of it still believing in the goodness of humans, still loving the world they were in, still believing that they had a future. And people would say to them, how, given what you've experienced and what you've seen and what you've been part of for the last, how do you do that? And they said, because I chose every single day to believe in that. And that was really, all of that kind of stuff weaving together around the same time for me is what, and not just that it wove, but I actually paid attention. I paid attention and went, if they can do this, my life is nowhere near as bad as that. What do I choose? And so I choose every day, even, and that's not to say that I don't have days which are just horrid,
Yes.
right? Or I'm miserable, or I get depressed occasionally, or whatever. But even when I'm in the middle of that, I'll go, okay, I am feeling this, right? I'm feeling miserable. I'm feeling that the whole world's out to get me. I'm whatever it might be. Okay, what can I see that is beautiful right now? Just to switch how I'm feeling so I can then see a different perspective. So, yeah. Just quietly get on with doing this, Nazim.
Yes. One more question here.
Yeah.
Okay. Is having multiple passions something you learned, or are you wired like that from beginning?
I think we're wired like it. My concern at the moment is there seems to be, and I'm seeing it in all sorts of different places, there seems to be, like I was saying earlier, this shift from you've got to be a specialist to you've got to have multiple strands. And I'm like, actually, there are those of us that naturally have and are wired with multiple passions. We thrive in change, in environments of change. We constantly keep hearing at the moment what a complex and volatile and uncertain and ambiguous world we live in, which is true. What I keep saying to people is we've always lived. We've always lived in those times, right? But yes, it seems much more obvious at the moment because there is huge amounts of change happening. But the reason that we are noticing it is because we have global connection, right? So you and I are in very different countries. We're in different time zones at the moment. We are connected with people around the world. We communicate with people around the world instantly. And so we're getting all of this information where it's always been like this, but before you wouldn't hear about it for 4 weeks because someone had written you a letter and had been put on a boat and then had been rowed across the water, right? So you didn't have that instant, constant understanding of what was happening everywhere else. You were just dealing with your current thing. And so my thing is we're wired like it. And so when people talk about this and they get quite, particularly my friends who are specialists and hate change, and I do have friends who if they had their way, literally nothing would change ever. And I'm like, you're missing out. Right? Because I look at this volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous world we live in, and it excites me. There's opportunity there, not necessarily opportunity to grow big or be successful or crush it, all of these things I hate. But there's opportunity to learn. There's opportunity to connect in new and different ways. There's opportunity to heal. There's opportunity to understand that, say, in your part of the world, you see life in this way. And because of that, you have these experiences. And then I share with you what I see from having lived in New Zealand and England and Scotland and go, okay, well, I share that with you. And then the two of us can learn from that, right? That excites me. And that also, when we bring that together and that diversity through the complexity, and we go, okay, well, there's all this stuff going on, but actually, what happens when we get together with our diverse perspectives, our diverse skills and knowledge and experiences? What can we co-create that helps to address one of the big challenges that people feel they're facing at the moment, right? That is what those of us who are naturally wired as people with multiple passions, we do that without trying, right? I have so many different connections in the world because I've lived the life I've lived, because I've played to my multiple passions. And I will, without even thinking about it, it wasn't until someone pointed out to me that I was doing it that I went, oh, Yeah, I do. I just do that, right? I didn't see it as anything special because it was just natural to me. But actually to other people, they'd be going, how did you do that? And I'd go into these organizations. So for a long time, I was a management consultant. And what I was brought in to do was to fix complex problems, right? And I'd come in and they'd be like, oh my God, it's so big. And it's, I just like, right. And I'd be like, okay, let me just have a little look. And I'd start having a look at this complex problem. And I'd go, well, what about that piece there and that bit there and that bit there? And I've just spoken to them and I've spoken to them and I've spoken to them. And I'm going to bring them together because actually all of them are trying to deal with it at the same time, but they're doing it differently. I wonder what would happen if we all started talking together, what we might come up with. And suddenly it would stop being this really complex, we can't cope thing. And it would become this people working together, bringing different perspectives. And I didn't think that's just how I would approach things. And so those of us who are naturally inclined, naturally wired, because I do believe that there's a certain level of wiring. And one of the things I've looked at is, and I use the big 5 personality types, big 5, big 4, big 5, whatever, big 5. It is big 5, right? And so they're kind of like 5 different spectrums, right? Only one of those, for me, truly matters as to whether you're a person with multiple passions. And that is, you need to be open to new experiences. If you are closed to new experiences, you are not a person with multiple passions. But all the rest of them, are you an introvert and an extrovert? Are you happy or sad? Well, you know what I mean. I'm making it simple. If you're on any of those others, it kind of doesn't matter. You know, are you spontaneous? Do you need to plan? That one, what I find with that is most people with multiple passions lean more towards having a level of spontaneity, but actually they also really like to plan things. And some of the joy can be that they find in their passions is planning, like, you know, what am I going to do? So for me, travel is one of my biggest passions, right? And so I love not only doing the traveling, but actually
55 countries you have mentioned.
Yeah, and there's still the rest of the world to see. There's still the rest of the world. But there's that piece for me of really enjoying going, I want to go there next. What can I learn about it before I get there? Where do I want to go within it? What kind of experiences do I want to have? Who do I want to meet, right? I love the planning side of it, but whereas I've got other friends who are hummingbirds who love planning to the point where they pretty much map out every day that they're in that country, I'll go, these are kind of the 5 things I want to do over that 10 days. Yep, that's about it. That's my planning, right? Like, how do I get there? Where am I staying? And these are the 5 things I want to do. And then when I get there, I'm kind of like, okay, how do I do it? Whereas they are very much on day 1. And I'm like, that's you doing you, and it's me doing me. But so again, planning spontaneity, it kind of doesn't matter where you're at on that spectrum, but if you're not into new experiences, you are not a person with multiple passions. Because for me, people with multiple passions are really high on needing, it's not a want, they need change and variety in their lives in order to be happy. If they don't have that, it becomes miserable.
So you use this metaphor of hummingbird with,
Yeah.
with multiple passions. Could you please explain more? What do you mean by that?
So
why not something else?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I first heard it used by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is known as the author of Eat, Love, Praise. Eat, Praise, Love, whichever way she puts it. She's written a whole lot of other books as well, but that's what first kind of made her famous, And she isn't a hummingbird. She is what I call a passion flame. So she's got the one thing. For her, it's writing. It's being an author is her one thing. But she'd had an experience where she'd had an email from somebody who said to her, they'd listened to her speak about whatever. But her message and the particular thing she'd been talking about was, just choose your one thing, right? And this person had written to her and said how upset that had made her, that she'd believed she was going to come and hear this person speak and open up alternative ways of moving forward for her, because she'd spent her whole life being told to find the one thing, couldn't. And so it made Elizabeth step back and go, well, that's not the experience I want people to have when they come and hear me, right? And so then she started looking around her life, and she realized that the 3 or 4 people who were closest to her in her life all weren't like her, right? They were not passion flames. And she's from the US, Elizabeth. Now this matters, because when I first heard, when I first heard her speak, and then you've seen my hair, right? Honestly, my hair went whoosh, because it was just like my whole being went, oh my God, this is me. I'm a hummingbird. And then I went, and it's not up to someone who's a passion flame to tell me how to be a hummingbird, right? It's up to hummingbirds to share with one another how to be hummingbirds. And then I went, okay, I kind of know what a hummingbird is, but I kind of don't. What's a hummingbird? So I Googled. And the reason I didn't know, like really know, was because hummingbirds only exist in the Americas. Hummingbirds can grow from the size of the top of my thumb to about that big. They are tiny. There are more than 300 species of hummingbirds. So that is part of the analogy that works for me, because when I'm talking with people with multiple passions, they're like, so I'm a person with multiple passions. Tell me exactly what a person with multiple passions is like, right? And I'm like, can't. There are more than 300 species. There are different, Gareth and I are both hummingbirds, totally different species from each other. But what happened with hummingbirds is they evolved within their environment. And so you will have hummingbirds with really long beaks, because all the flowers in their environment, so what all hummingbirds do is they spend all day going from flower to flower to flower to flower to flower, collecting nectar. They have to, because their metabolism is so high that they work through it within every 10 minutes. So they have to be collecting nectar all day. The only reason that they can stop and sleep overnight when all the flowers close is because they go into a state of torpor, right? And so again, I'm like, and when you watch hummingbirds without really understanding what's going on underneath them, it looks like they're just flitting for no reason. Like they're just constantly on the move. But actually, they are very incredibly clever around knowing which tree, flowers, whatever is going to have nectar now. So they might look like they're flitting without any reason or purpose, but actually they know where to go next. They are flying in a pattern. They're very territorial, secret warriors. But hummingbirds can fly upside down, forward, sideways. They can hover. They can also fly backwards. They are the only birds in the world that can fly backwards, right? And so my thing is that, again, when I look at human hummingbirds, we have that adaptability, that agility, that ability to go, these are the things that at the moment I get sustenance from, that make me feel alive, but also, and it's one of the things I work with my clients around, the more I'm involved in a variety of communities around the world, right, of people with multiple passions. Most of us at some point before we learned better have had some form of illness associated with burning out, right? So I was about 18 and I got glandular fever and I was wiped out for 3 months. I had burnt the candle at both ends, and in the middle I had nothing, right? And I mean, there's all sorts of different illnesses that are that kind of thing, where you've basically drained all your energy and you become ill. So what I work with my clients around is, yes, you've got all these things, you've got all the multiple, you also need to build in rest time, right? And that rest time needs to be proper deep rest, so that you come back ready to flit again. So that's where the hummingbird thing came from, was hearing Elizabeth talk about it, going, oh my goodness, that is me. And you know what it's like, you come across something like that and suddenly it opens up And then I came across Emily Wapnick, who calls us multi-potentialites. I came across Barbara Scher, who called us scanners. I came across two women who are running a podcast, and they called us, and this one I'm calling human Venn diagrams, because both of them are very sciencey with a lot of creative artiness underneath it, but they loved the idea of, you've got your things and you've got your thing and your thing. And then there's a bit in the middle and there's all these intersections. And so they would call people with multiple passions human Venn diagrams, right? Because you have all these intersections. But the hummingbird for me, for whatever reason, just resonated. And I'm fascinated by the birds themselves, but also the more I learn about them, the more I see the analogies and how they play for those of us who are wired with multiple passions. So that's where that came from. They're awesome birds, should you ever get the chance.
So, Vikki, could you please tell more about the book that you have?
Yes. So it's a couple of years ago now. Where's time gone, Nazim? I'm like, yeah. When I'm kind of like, it's only last year. Actually, it's not. It's about nearly 3 years ago now. I got the opportunity to co-author a book called Transforming Your Life. This is volume 2. So there are 22 authors who worked together on this book, and almost all of us are from a coaching background. There are one or two who are not. But what we share in here, we each have a chapter. We each are bringing different perspectives. So that was one of the things that attracted me. And what we're sharing is a story from our own lives of transformation. And for me, I talk about multiple passions and how the experiences I had in my life brought me to this awareness of being a person with multiple passions. And through that, discovering secret powers, right, that we as people with multiple passions have. And the beautiful thing about this book is that my chapter is the last one, which makes it really easy to find. So I did that a couple of years ago. I was working with these amazing people from around the world, and the people who were organizing it all for us and kind of coordinating us, if you like, and facilitating us through the process, also facilitated us through the process that brought the book to the point of being a best-selling book across multiple countries and in different, because the way the book world works is it gets kind of categorized. So you have all these categories, and so not only were we best-selling in lots of different countries, we were also best-selling across a variety of categories. So things like personal transformation was one, or personal growth, I think they call it. But there was also things like, what was one of the others? They have some really random ones. I think one of them was mystical, and I went, really? And, okay.
It should be in the mystical category for sure, for having multiple passions.
Yeah, fantasy. It's not a fantasy. This is life. But each of us, the other thing that I loved about this book was, so not only were we telling a bit of our own story, like our own transformation story, but from that we shared some really practical, quite simple things. And because there are 22 different people writing in here as well, there will be people who read it who are specialists and find my chapter kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but doesn't apply to me, right? But there are lots of other chapters in here that will. And just as I said earlier, people with multiple passions will find mine super interesting because they'll go, oh, there are other people like me in the world. But they will also find other things that people share. You know, there's one person in here who talks about what she learned through grieving, right? She lost her partner when they were just about to get married, and she went through this incredible process of grieving and how to grieve in a way that allows you to absolutely go through it and come, you know, some really practical suggestions there. And all humans have experiences like that. We all lose people at some point, right? And so that's one of the things I loved about it. But I also found I love writing. Writing's one of my things. Words are one of my things. Reading is you may have noticed in my posts. Books are really important to me. And I mean, I've always wanted to write, I've always wanted to be an author, but I hadn't really sat down and gone, okay, so let's be an author then, right? It was always there. It's one of those things. But also writing for me is really easy. And so what I found by going through this process with, I intend to write my own books, but by doing it this way first, it helped me learn a whole lot of things, right? And part of what my learning was not everybody finds writing as easy as I do. And the other thing I learned, so they had, like, you'd write your chapter and then you'd send it in, and they'd have an editor who would then have a look at what you'd written and edit it and send it back to you. And when they sent mine back to me, I got incredibly upset. And the reason for that was because it was no longer my voice.
Okay.
The way they'd rewritten it, they'd put in all these really flowery, it just wasn't me, right? And I got really upset. So I contacted the people who were facilitating it and went, I'm not signing off on that. That is not my voice. That is not me. I would be embarrassed to have people thinking those were my words. And they had a look and they went, oh, and they had a look at the two, right? Because I sent them what had been sent back and I sent mine. And they had a look at it and went, oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. And so, but that was part of that process of, I still held the power in that, right? It was my books, my words. Yes, for me, what the editor was there to do was to make sure it made sense. And so they changed and gave me a new editor. And what that editor did was come back to me and say things like, you use this particular phrase. What does it mean? I know it makes sense to you, but you need to help other people come on this journey with you, right? So that was really awesome.
Yeah.
So yes, it's amazing. It's one of those things where I didn't go out to go, I must make this dream come true. I got sent an email saying, we're doing this opportunity. Are you interested? I went, yes. And that's one of the things I think is sometimes it's you going out and saying, I want this, and being very intentional about it and making it happen by putting everything in place. And other times it's about being open, and when an opportunity comes, going, okay, where does that align with me? I'm totally open to this right now. I'm going to say yes and see what happens. And that's what I did with the book. It was, yes, I absolutely want to do this. And then I did. And it was amazing. And I said to you earlier, I was so excited when I got one that's like, it's mine and I can hold it. And I'm an author and I'm just there. It was that whole kind of, oh my God. Yeah. So sometimes it's about saying, I want this, and putting things in place to lead you to it. And other times it's about being open and just going yes to whatever opportunity and seeing what comes out of that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Vikki, for your time. And it was wonderful to interview a like-minded person. So it is nice because, the world is left brain oriented, logical, just focus on one thing. You can't be scattered across, and this, be practical, be grounded, don't do this, that, like so much of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, be this, you should. So still, you have endured to be yourself. And thanks to the rebellious child inside who didn't compromise. And obviously, when we join the dots, what your life is all about. And you are doing same with other people to help them to understand and heal and get clarity. Amazing work. And I wish more books come out of you. And,
right, no pressure.
and what I liked was there was this unmasking of, hey guys, you know what? This is not only me. There was another past, who had been through like most of you guys had, but I made a choice. That was very inspiring, from where you have been to where you are and what you are doing. So thanks for all that inspiration, and it was wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful talking with you as well. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to more opportunities like this.
Yes.
We might have to do it the other way around. I should interview you.
Oh, sure. And friends, I'll be in the description of the YouTube. I'm going to make the contact details available of Vikki. Whoever is interested, who are not into the normal category, who think that yes, you are different, you are into multiple passions and need some help, and you're not alone. There is help available, so you can reach out to Vikki, friends, and I'll provide all the required details in the description, and Vikki is available to chat with you. So thank you once again, Vikki.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.